Welcome to today's episode of the Author's Way podcast. I am so excited for this conversation because we're diving into the world of storytelling with John Ryland. John grew up surrounded by Southern folklore and ghost stories, and that early love of storytelling grew into a lifelong passion. Today, he's the author of 10 books spanning Southern Gothic and dark psychological suspense. John began writing when he was just a kid and completed his first novel when he was only 14. And since then, he has spent a lifetime sharing his stories. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to John today is he and I met at an art fair locally here in Alabama, and he's going to share with us how he puts himself out there and gets out into the world and markets his book and promotes his book. The art fair was just one way that he does it, but he has some really great tips and tricks for how he does that, because let's face it, even if you have a publisher, you have to get your books out in front of your audience. There's really no other way to do it. So he's going to share some of the ways that he does that with us, and I'm really excited to hear that. We're also going to talk about how he builds really great characters in his book and how he gives back to his community by mentoring young upcoming authors. So if you have ever thought about writing and wondered about the publishing process, or just love a good conversation about storytelling, I am glad you're joining us for this one. So let's jump in. Welcome, John. I'm so excited for you to be here today. I love talking to fiction authors. I think there's such a skill that goes into being able to create really great fiction, and so I'm excited to chat today. So, do you want to tell us just a little bit about you, a little bit about yourself, your writing, or anything you want to share?
Yeah, Jennifer, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. Uh, I grew up in the South, and I grew up hearing stories, hearing, tall tales. So at an early age, I was introduced to fiction. It was just oral fiction. So I think my love for writing fiction grew from that point. And it's just been a long journey to get to where I am now. But I am a writer of Southern Gothic and dark psychological suspense fiction. And I currently have 10 books in print as we speak.
That is awesome. You know, I was actually having this conversation the other day with someone about the spoken word. And I think Southerners, and I grew up Southern as well, I think Southerners are specifically skilled at storytelling.
Mhm.
And because I heard, I grew up hearing the stories, and I remember, you may remember this as well. I remember being a kid, and the one of the most fascinating things that I loved is we would always hear about the Alabama ghost stories, like all the
Yes.
different ghosts from, and there were books written
Mhm.
about all the different ghosts from Alabama, and that was something that was always fascinating to me. And you may have had some similar experiences growing up,
Well, they have the 13 Alabama Ghosts
right?
book.
Yes.
I forget who it was that wrote it, but one of the ghosts in the book is in Winfield, I want to say, where they have the
I
face in the window.
That's the one I always remember, is the face in
Yeah,
the window.
and
Yeah.
and that's not very far from here. It's like
Yeah.
30 minutes from here. So I mean, I've actually been to that courthouse, and they have a little arrow pointing to the face you can see. So, it's really cool when you hear all these stories and then you see them in a book. and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, they're legit. They're real stories.
Right.
And then you get to go to the places and
Mhm.
see them. It really reinforces that whole concept of ghosts exist. These stories weren't just wild stories.
Right. Right. So tell me a little bit about, so did you say you have, okay, remind me again, how many books do you have? 10?
I have
10 books.
10
So
books.
you've been putting your stories on paper for a while
A
now.
long time. Um,
Yeah.
it really started when I was real young, prior to 10 years old, probably. I would just write little stories and read them to people. And then I think I wrote my first novel around the age of 14. And I
Wow.
mean, looking back, it was really terrible. I was 14. So the expectation wasn't too great, I guess. But I wrote one when I was 14. I wrote another one when I was 17. And probably about 19, I wrote another one. And all three of them were terrible, but progressively less so, I like to think. But, while I never did publish any of those three, I did learn a lot of how to build a novel, how to build suspense and foreshadowing, and just the physical bones of a novel and how it needs to be done and how it doesn't need to be done. So yeah, I've been at it for quite a while.
I mean, seriously, how many 14-year-olds write a novel? I mean, that's pretty impressive. Even if those didn't get published, I think just the bravery kind of behind putting yourself out there
Mhm.
and actually sharing those stories is pretty phenomenal at that
And
age.
I guess it's the ignorance of youth. I really at the time I really didn't think about how monumental it really was. I was just like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm gonna write this book, and I had my little electric typewriter, and I would you know chug along and just work on it. And I think it ended up being like 150 pages, and it was really adolescent and probably full of typos and Lord knows what else. But I did it, and I remember thinking while I was doing it was like I'm writing a book, you know,
Yeah.
and I had no idea about publishing, the process, editing, all that kind of stuff. I had no clue about that because I didn't grow up in that type of environment, where the way people did things like that.
Right.
So I was just kind of out on my own doing stuff, just shooting in the dark, basically, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating process. And so are your books self-published or have you gone through like the traditional publishing process with them?
My first two were self-published. Uh, it, one novel and a collection of short stories. I self-published those, and then I kind of got picked up by a traditional publisher, and then I got picked up by a different traditional publisher, and so some of the 10, I think there's five are traditionally published,
Oh,
four by one publisher and one by another. But I still self-publish from time to time, in between books from my publisher. So
you know, I like that, and I think that's kind of an important message to share because one of the things that when I talk to aspiring authors is they go back and forth whether they should self-publish versus looking for a publisher or looking for an agent. And I think there is a lot of value sometimes, and I like, that you shared that. There's a lot of value sometimes in, you can go ahead and self-publish and you can always continue. You can always look for a publisher
Hmm.
afterward as well. So there's still opportunity. Just because you've self-published doesn't mean there's not still opportunity to find a publisher.
Oh, definitely. I feel like personally having two books in print kind of sent a message to the publishers
Yeah.
that hey, he can finish a project, and
Right.
this isn't a one shot wonder. Some people write
Right.
one book and that's it. And so I think even though it's self publishing, there's the stigma behind self publishing, which is a whole nother story. But I feel like the fact that you put something out there, you finished it, and you went through the process. For me, if I were a publisher, that would not be a black mark,
Right.
especially not today because so many people choose to be indie.
Yeah.
Which I will say, let me add this: a lot of people, it's like a lot of people choose to be indie because they don't get picked up. And so they say, "Oh, I want to be indie." But if a big publisher called, they would jump on at the chance. Does that make sense?
No, that makes total sense. That makes total sense.
Which I mean,
I
I agree.
think
Some people really do choose to be indie, and that's wonderful. That's fine.
right. Right.
I just, I don't have a preference to be honest. It's for me, it's pretty much the same level of work.
Yeah.
Because when I self-publish, I hire an editor, have an editor that I use. So I go back and forth with her through my editing. I go back and forth with cover art, just like I do with my publisher. So it's basically the same thing. I just don't have to put up the money up front with the publisher. I
Right.
don't have to pay the editor. I don't have to pay the cover art people.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I like to help people understand the difference. Because so many people think that if I'm not picked up by a publisher, then I'm not good enough. And a lot of times it really is just like you were saying, once you get a couple of books out there, then they kind of see there are tons of people out there writing books. And so for the publishers to sort of get filter through everything out there, you've got to have a little bit of something to hook onto. So,
Mhm.
and the fact that self-publishing has become, there's not as much of a stigma against it
Yeah.
as there used to be.
Mm-mm.
It's become a much easier process. The platforms out there are really kind of a lot easier than, I mean, you have to know technically a little bit about it, but you can learn. It's
Hmm.
not that hard to learn how to use them. So, it is becoming a lot easier for people who want to go that route.
Well, just from 2018 when I published my first
Mhm.
novel to now, so that's what 7 years. The industry has changed a lot as
Yeah.
far as self-publishing. I do remember when the first time I uploaded my first novel, which was called Souls Harbor. Amazon didn't have the algorithm to where they help you format your book. It'll just come out the way you have it formatted. And it was just crazy. So, I had to take it back down, go through, physically reformat a lot of stuff. And a lot of it was trial and error.
Yeah.
But now it's much easier
Yeah.
to produce a good quality book.
And there's some really good tools out there for
Hmm.
to help you format
Oh, definitely.
and do all of that, where you don't really have to have as much knowledge in all of those processes yourself.
Hmm.
So, and I love that. I
And
tend to
I,
like to do a lot of the formatting myself without using the tools because I'm a little bit picky. But
mhm.
but there's some tools out there that are really great that can help with that and really kind of make it a no-brainer.
Hmm. And the support industry for authors has just blossomed so
Yeah.
much, for like Fiverr, places like that, where you can find editors at a reasonable price, and you can find cover artists, you can find formatters, you can find people to support you. I mean, you got to pay for it, but there people there. Went back in 2018, it wasn't so prevalent. You had to really kind of scour
Right.
the internet to find good people.
Right. Yeah. So, so I want to talk just a little bit about the work that you're doing to get the word out about your books. So you and I actually met. You were at a art festival, a local art festival, promoting your book,
Hmm.
and but you do that fairly often. That's a pretty big part of what you do, I believe. So tell
It
us a
is.
little bit about how you are like getting, because I mean you can write a book and put the book out there and self-publish it, but if nobody knows it's out there,
Mhm.
then you're not getting it into the hands of the people who want to read it. So, what are some of the things that you do to market yourself and get your books out to your audiences?
So I think, as an author, and if you don't automatically have a huge following, if you're not, a star who everybody already knows, and you write a book, I think you have to have a multi-pronged approach to getting the word out. I mean, definitely social media. Uh, I have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and all these other accounts that I promote, well, my book on. But I also do a lot of events in the Southeast. I typically try to do between 30 to 35 events a year, which is a lot.
Mhm.
But I travel around, I talk to people, try to make connections with other writers, with other artists, and I just, you have to do something almost every day to promote your book and yourself. And it's a lot of work to go, drive 3 4 hours, set up, do a show all day, and drive home. But it's part of the process of getting your name out there. And if I mean, unfortunately, if you're not willing to put the work in to get your name out there, it's going to be very hard for people to find you. I mean, even I've been doing about 30 shows a year for 2 or 3 years now, and before that, I did 10 or 12. But even after all these years, it's still a battle to get my book in front of readers sometimes. I mean, I have a website, I have social media, I travel, I do interviews, I go on the radio, and it's just something that you have to be prepared to do if you're an indie writer, uh, or a small or with a small press. You have to be willing to promote yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you do most of your promotion yourself, or do you utilize like PR or publicists or anything like
I do
that?
most of it myself. I have a few people that sometimes will help and promote me on their websites and their podcasts and things like that. But I don't have an dedicated PR person, just
Yeah.
because of the cost and time and
Right.
things like that.
Right. Okay. I love what you're doing. I think that sets a great example for other authors, and I think it kind of shows that even when you have a publisher, there's still a lot you have to get out there. You have to get out there yourself, and you have to put it out there.
You really do, unless you sign with a big five publisher.
Right.
um, you're gonna have to self promote. It's just there's no avoiding it. If you want to And I guess a lot of it depends on what you want as an author. You
Right.
know what your end goals are. My end goal is to be, self-sufficient and to support myself and my family through my writing. So it kind of takes on a little bit of a business approach that, you have to promote your product. You have to promote yourself, or you'll never get to that point.
Right. Right.
And
So,
even, my publisher does stuff to help promote my books because, they make more money the more books I sell as well.
right.
But, they can't afford to do a multi-million dollar national campaign,
Right.
so I have to do my part.
Right. Yeah.
And if you'll, in a lot of small presses in their contract, they will specifically state that the author is responsible for self promotion as well as they are.
Right. What have you found to be like maybe some of your favorite ways of doing that, or the things that get you the most success? Is it the art festivals? Is it or is there anything that really kind of stands out to you as far as like these are the things, these are the two or three things that really work the best for me?
I have a pretty decent following on my author page on Facebook.
Okay.
And so I get a lot of interaction through that and get some good traction through that. And, I have an email list that I'll send out once a month, and I garner a good bit of reaction from that. But my absolute favorite thing to do is just to be out there and talk to people about the books, about my books. My wife tells me I can talk about my books all day, and I probably could. So, just getting out there and meeting the people, that's my favorite part of everything.
So, kind of switching topics just a little bit. What sort of led you to this genre? I know we were talking a little bit earlier about, the tales that we hear growing up and but what really made you interested in creating stories, these more like thriller, suspense type of stories?
I think I typically lean towards the more shadowy side of life. I just like the dark tales. I like the suspense and not knowing what's going to happen. And I think it was just a natural outgrowth of that uh, personality trait that I have. Uh, I've always read that type of story, and being from the South, I've always been drawn to the Southern writers, and most of their work tends to lean that way because I think as a Southerner, it's just a fact of life that, there are bad things out there. There are things that are happening, things that, and I think we are more in touch with it, maybe, or we
Yeah.
don't dismiss it as much. And so that whole shadowy, ghostly, mysterious aura just permeates the South to the point where it's inescapable. And especially if you're from the country, more so, I guess. And so I think, like, I said, it's just a natural outcropping of just who I am and what I'm drawn to.
I love that. We kind of there's a lot about, you know, sort of understanding our roots and,
Hmm.
really kind of working with where we came from. And I think that's it's it's interesting and it helps you just really kind of explore
Hmm.
things a lot more deeply.
It really does because, you know, people ask me, they're like, well, how do you write Southern Gothic so well? Well, the genre of Southern Gothic involves like isolation, poverty, uh, usually some mental illness, some supernatural elements, whether real or perceived, usually some patriarchal antagonist. It's very atmospheric. And I'm like, I grew up Southern Gothic, so it's just natural that I would write it.
Yeah. Uh, so one of the books that I have of yours is a book of short stories. It's called Southern Gothic.
Mhm.
So I adore short stories, and when I write fiction, I am probably more prone to write short stories than more like a novel. Do you have a preference? I know you have, you have novels, you have the short stories. Do you have a preference? Is there one that really kind of speaks to you more than others?
Um, I think they both have their pros and cons. For me personally, a story is going to dictate what it is. If it's a
Ah,
short story, it's just going to be a short story. And if it's a novel, it's going to be a novel. And people laugh, but I really don't have a lot of control over it when that happens.
oh, yeah, that's a good
It
point.
just it's I write the story and then I get it's done, and I just have this feeling that it's done, so I just leave it. And usually I abide by that. But I absolutely love the short stories, uh, the whole premise behind it that it's quick and it's
Yeah,
done and it's encapsulated and and it's almost like a jab in boxing. It's just a quick
right,
something to snatch the reader and drag them through this real intense situation and then give them the conclusion and you're done with them. It's
right.
kind of like speed dating. Whereas a novel, I do enjoy the novels in the fact that I can flesh a lot of things out, really
Right.
bring the atmosphere into the story, give a lot more backstory, things like that. So I'm excuse me. I really do enjoy both. And like I said, if people think that it's strange when I say this, my wife especially, but I don't have any control over what it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
either going to be a short story or it's going to be a novel. And it all depends on how I feel afterwards.
That that sounds like a true artist. Because it really is. And I'm a painter. I do oil paintings, and it's kind of the same way. It's, you kind of see where it takes you.
And I think any creative, whether it's
Yeah,
an artist or a photographer or a writer, I think the muse just reveals itself
right,
to show you what it is.
right.
It's like a sculpture. It it reveals itself, and that's what it is. And hardly ever do I have a crossover, because I can tell early on, oh, this is going to be a short story, or I can tell this is going to be a novella, or this is a big one. I know early on, so I kind of work in that direction. And some of my short stories are short, 3 or 4 thousand, but some of them are 12, 15,000 words.
Yeah,
So the story writes itself, and I'm just kind of along for the ride. But
nice.
the one exception that has ever kind of crossed over is my novel, The Unkindness of Ravens. I wrote it and I thought, oh, this is a short story. So I wrote it and it ended up about 10,000 words. And I'm like, okay, well, that's done. I'm happy with it. But as the weeks went by, it just kept nagging at me that it wasn't finished. I needed to, do more. So I sat down and I wrote another probably, 15, 20,000 words and I got it to be where it is. So, I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah,
honestly, I think as a writer, you have to follow the muse. You have to follow where
right,
the story wants to go.
right. One of one of the questions I get asked the most are people who want to write more fiction is about characters, like developing characters.
Hmm.
and and really kind of like how, what is the process for doing that? Do you have a really good method for developing your characters?
One thing that I do when I have a character, I have a general idea of who they are and their personality and what their personality needs to be to move the story along. But one way that I've really fleshed them out is make sure that I include a lot of human everyday characteristics, the way they walk, the way, any sometimes I'll add a saying or something that they like to use a lot, or mannerisms, whether they move their hands a lot or they brush their hand through their hair a lot. Just give them a normal human characteristic that kind of identifies them as a unique person, and then just let them go from there. Because I have read tons of books where the characters are all similar. They're just a
Right.
character in a book. And I want my characters to be somebody that the reader can be like, oh yeah, I know people like that, who touch stuff or who, say things or stand a certain way. And I think that helps the reader to identify with that character. And once you get a reader to invest in that character, then they're hooked on the story and they want to see how the character progresses.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be even just a little detail
Yeah, I
that
mean
makes
sometimes
it
it's just
unique.
small stuff,
Hmm.
just a a word or two here and there, or just the way they interact with people,
Hmm.
their inner dialogue, just all kind of stuff you can add. And I think for a young writer to learn that early on is
Yeah.
very helpful to
Yeah.
make them human. I mean,
Right.
readers want to identify with the character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's really where the connection starts to
Mhm.
be made with the between the reader and the writer.
Well, as a writer, if you don't elicit some type of response from your reader, then you're not going to connect with them in a way that makes them want to read other works that you put out. And the only way you can really connect with them is through the characters, is through the people in your book. And if they like the characters or hate the characters or feel sorry for the character, you have to build some type of connection
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Yeah. Right. So you shared with me when we spoke before that you work with a group of young writers.
Yes, ma'am. I do. A teacher at a local high school just messaged me out of the blue. She had found that I was a local writer, and she had a group of high school kids that she was sort of mentoring in after school program. And they were poets and artists and writers. And she asked if I would be interested in coming and just speaking to them. And I absolutely loved the concept of her, supporting these young writers. So naturally I jumped at the chance. And so I met with them, and we talked for an hour or so, and then I met with them a few other times. And it's just really refreshing to see young people drawn to being a creative, because when I was young, there wasn't that wasn't there. There,
Right.
I remember being a teenager and I'm like, I'm the only person who writes stories. I'm the only person who, you know, does this kind of stuff. And it was very isolating. But to know that there are groups out there, and I'm sure she's not the only one, in the country that does this, but it's just great to see. So any way I can support them or help them, naturally just jump at the chance. So we through our meetings and my discussions and talks with the teacher, we kind of hatched a plan to publish the kids' work through the small imprint that I formed that I used to self-publish my own work. And of course they were ecstatic. They were, and it's strange. You get the initial, they're all jacked up, they're happy, and then a few days later, the realness of it kind of settles in, and you see these kids starting to get worried and nervous, and they're like, oh, I don't know, and the whole process was very educational for them, because that's what I told the teacher. If they're going to be a writer or a poet, and they're going to put their work out there, they have to learn the process, because it is a process. And I said, one of the things that I want to do with this is introduce them to that process, but kind of gently, rather than just them submitting and getting a form letter or something, a rejection. So that was the process that we went through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely love this concept. And when you were telling me about this, I thought, oh my gosh, there could be some other opportunities out there for other authors,
Mm-hmm.
in their local communities to do that kind of thing. And that really spoke to me. And I love that. I've worked with different writers groups in the past and different things, but to be able to influence young writers and young artists like that, I think it's phenomenal. Sorry.
Bless you. I think, though, not to say that I'm Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or somebody, but I have learned a lot
Yeah.
along the way, and I've achieved a small measure of success. And so I think, honestly, it's a responsibility for writers to help other people avoid some of the pitfalls that they fell into.
Yeah.
And so, I mentioned earlier that I was picked up by two different publishers. Well, the reason I only did one book with one publisher was because things didn't work out nearly as well as I wanted them to. So, but then lesson learned. So we with these kids, I discussed that. I discussed, contracts. I discussed, submission, formatting, just about everything that you could think of to introduce them to the process. And we made them go through the process of formatting and submissions and edits and cover art and the whole works. And I think ultimately they'll be better off for it.
Absolutely. And those are not the kinds of things that they would learn otherwise.
It's
You
not.
know, when you decide, when anyone decides that, okay, I want to publish, there's a lot that you have to find out about. And a lot of times it's
Mhm.
trial and error.
It is. And
Mhm.
the odd thing is you don't even know what you don't know.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, there's and I remember what my first novel, I'm a creative, I'm a writer, and that's what I do. And so when it came time to publish it, you know, I knew I needed an editor, so I got that. And I did my own cover art, so I had that. But then you go through the process of submissions, and I'm like, where do I even find a publisher? Where do I
Right.
even find, so, you know, granted, it's only been 7 or 8 years, but the industry has changed so much.
It
And, the
has.
internet has changed so much since it. And so, if I'd had somebody back then that was where I am now that's telling me this stuff, it would have been a whole lot less stressful. and a lot
Right.
more enjoyable. You know,
Right.
uh, so we ultimately got things put together. We have a mixed anthology of all the kids' works that will release on September 20th, and we're going to have a big little bash for the kids and a release party, so they'll really enjoy that part of it. But one thing that I've really emphasized to the kids is that there is a disconnect for many creatives with the business side of publishing.
Right.
As writers, as artists, we want to create, we want to write, we want to paint, we want to, sculpt or whatever it is that we do. That's what we want to do. But then having to completely turn the page and approach it as a business, it's a little difficult because, we're left brain, right brain authors, and it's a different mindset. And it's hard sometimes for people to do that. I tend sometimes to be a little lazy on that end of it, because it's not fun. It's numbers and
Right.
it's research and it's this and that's the boring part. But
Right.
you have to do both sides.
Right. Right. And I think that I've always believed that one of the best ways to take the fear out of something is to just learn how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And by helping at a younger age, helping these young people kind of understand just how it works, it probably will help them in the long run to continue to be creative and continue to put their stuff out there, as opposed to kind of letting themselves being stopped by the fear of just not knowing.
Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that to the kids that how many great novels are sitting in people's desks or in
It
their
right.
computer now because they were just too afraid of hearing the word no.
Right.
And the thing is, when you submit, a lot of stars have to align for you to get accepted. It has to be the right the right publisher, the right submission manager, the right story, the right day, the right, everything has to fall in line. So you have to do that research to as align as many of those stars as you
Mhm.
can, before you even submit the book.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, honestly, and I don't blame publishers because they have to make money or they'll go out of
Right.
business and nobody will get published. So it's a necessary evil, I guess.
Right. Right.
And
Well, you'll
honestly,
have
if I had to read, you know, 10,000 short stories a year and decide which I would want them to be formatted in a way that made my life easier.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I don't hold anything against them.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, well, you'll have to let me know when the book is available. I would love
Hmm.
to read it and would love to share it as well.
Hmm. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It like I said, it will release on September 20th. So I would definitely get you the link to that
Yep.
book. Uh, and I've kind of it's odd that the summer is usually like a downtime for me as far as
Yeah.
my own personal writing and stuff like that. I guess the Gothic vibe just doesn't percolate a lot when it's bright and sunny and hot outside. So I do most of my personal writing in the fall and winter and early spring. So it was a good time to approach this with these young
Mm.
people and do that.
Yeah.
But as a writer, I've always got stuff cooking. So
I'm
yeah.
sure. I'm sure. Yeah, I love that. So first off, I appreciate you spending some time with me today. I think I I love the work that you're doing. I love the genre, and I'm anxious to read some more of your books. But for anyone who would like to know more about you, would like to know more about your books and how to get them, what is the best way for them to reach you?
The best place to get everything that has to do with me is my personal author website, and it is at gspressbooks.com, gspressbooks.com.
Okay.
And that has all my books. It has, a little bio about me. It has some poetry. It has some, a blog. It has just everything that has to do with me is on that website.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes. So we'll have a
Hmm.
link there out there. So anyone who wants to go to the podcast show notes will have that. Is what do you have anything? I know you just mentioned the book that's coming out in September. Is there anything else coming up for you?
I do have a new novel that should be coming out either in the winter or early spring. That is called A Meeting of Consequence. It's sort of
Oh,
a mashup between the butterfly effect and Groundhog Day, if you will.
oh,
Um, a down and out musician and a personal injury lawyer meet for the first time in a fatal car crash. And but then they wake up again the next day, or the same day, and they begin repeating the cycle of crashing and dying. And ultimately, they have to figure out, they have little deja vu moments during the day, as they relive the same day over and over. And ultimately, they have to figure out why it's happening. And so it gets really complicated and all that. But it's a really fun book. It's a little less scary, but it still has a little bit of a dark kind of theme to it. And I will say in all of my stories and my novels, and the central theme through just about all of them is perseverance,
mm,
is not giving up and fighting your way through this terrible tragedy or this impossible situation. And so naturally that's what they have to do as well.
awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think that'd be a really cool read.
It's really it was a little bit of a departure from my typical just regular Southern Gothic type stuff that I do. It's a little bit of a little bit more of a kind of a sci-fi feel, weird, uh, almost. I'm searching for a word here, almost like disembodiment with the
Mm,
two characters that they, you know, slowly become aware of what's happening,
yeah,
and naturally they don't want it to happen,
right.
but it has to happen. So it really delves into the two different personalities of the characters and how they deal with the situation.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'll be
Thank
watching for
you.
that one. Yeah. So one more question for you before we go. I
Mhm.
always like to know what authors are reading or what kind of inspires them. So do you have any authors that you love to read or any specific books that are maybe your favorite books that you recommend?
Naturally, I read a lot of you know uh, books that are typically in my genre.
Right.
Harlan Corbin and those guys. But my absolute favorite author is Anthony Doerr. He wrote All the Light We Cannot See, won a Pulitzer Prize and all that.
Oh
But
yeah.
his work is dark, but not like Stephen King dark, but it's kind of dark themed, little supernatural elements kind of drifting throughout it. But he really, his writing style is just amazing, and he delves into the personalities of the characters really, really well. And ironically, another reader that I read a lot is Ken Follett, who does historical fiction. Um,
Okay.
and I just really like his style. His style is very succinct, very conversational, and
Right.
uh, and I love his writing style. And I kind of model my style, kind of a mix between the two of those. Um, and but really, those two are the main two that I read. Of course, I read a lot of indie works from my local authors group and friends of mine who are also writers. I read a lot of their work as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you sharing, all the insights, and
Mhm.
we will be looking forward to those two books that are coming out in September and in the winter, but then, all the other stuff I know that you're continuing to create.
Oh yeah, definitely. I appreciate you having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I love doing podcasts, especially
Yeah.
ones like this where it's more conversational. Um, but it's been a blast, and I thank you for having me on.
All right, awesome. Well, and to the audience, thank you so much for listening, and go out and check out John's work, and check out his website. And I know that you'll find something, I'm sure you'll find something fascinating with his work. All right.